Welcome to the Weekly Word by Geddes Kerr at the Oakton, Virginia United Methodist Church. I'm Bruce Long, standing in this week for Geddes. Geddes is fine, just taking a well-deserved break on the Jersey Shore in his home state. Today's message is all from Geddes. I'm simply the messenger. Our message is another work by one of Geddes's favorite authors, Max Lucado. Stories, parables. We use them to teach, to share, to comfort. We learn this technique from the greatest teacher, Jesus Christ. The book of Mark, chapter 4, verse 2, tells us that Jesus taught them many things using stories. Parables help us understand simple and complex truths. Here is one of Max Lucado's favorites. Max calls this his best parable on a biblical story. I hope that you agree. The parable of the mop bucket. The hallway is silent except for the wheels of the mop bucket and the shuffle of the old man's feet. Both sound tired. Both know these floors. How many nights has Hank cleaned them? Always careful to get in the corners. Always careful to set up his yellow caution sign warning of wet floors. Always chuckling as he does. Be careful, everyone, he laughs to himself, knowing that no one else is near. Hank's health isn't what it used to be. Gout keeps him awake. Arthritis makes him limp. His glasses are so thick, his eyeballs look twice their size. His shoulders stoop, but he does his work, slopping soapy water on the tile floor, scrubbing the heel marks left by the well-heeled lawyers. He'll be finished an hour before quitting time. Always finishes early, has for the last 20 years. When finished, he'll put away his bucket and take a seat outside the office of the senior partner and wait. He never leaves early, although he could. No one would know, but he does not. He broke the rules once, never again. Sometimes, if the door is open, he'll enter the office. Not for long, just to look. The office suite is larger than his apartment. He'll run his finger over the desk. He'll stroke the soft leather couch. He'll stand at the window and watch the gray sky turn gold. And he'll remember. He once had such an office. Back when Hank was Henry. Back when the custodian was an executive. Long ago, before the night shift, before the mop bucket, before the maintenance uniform, before the scandal. Hank doesn't think about it much now. No reason to. Got in trouble, got fired, and got out. That's it. Not many people know about it. Better that way. No need to tell them. It's his secret. Hank's story, by the way, is true. I changed the name and a detail or two. I gave him a different job and put him in a different century, but the story is factual. You have heard it. You know it. When I give you his real name, you'll remember. But more than a true story, it's a common story. It's a story of a derailed dream. It's a story of high hopes colliding with harsh realities. It happens to all dreamers, and since all have dreamed, it happens to all of us. In Hank's case, it was a mistake he could never forget, a grave mistake. Hank killed someone. He came upon a thug beating up an innocent man, and Hank lost control. He killed the mugger. When word got out, Hank got out. Hank would rather hide than go to jail. So he ran. The executive became a fugitive. True story? Common story? Most stories are not as extreme as Hank's. Few spend their lives running from the law. Many, however, live with regrets. I could have gone to college on a golf scholarship, a friend told me just last week on the golf course. I had that scholarship offer right out of high school, but I joined a rock and roll band. Ended up never going to college. Now I'm stuck fixing garage doors. Now I'm stuck. The epitaph of a derailed dream. Pick up a high school yearbook and read the "what I want to do" sentence under each picture. You'll get dizzy breathing the thin air of mountaintop visions. Yet, take the yearbook to a 20th year reunion and read the next chapter. Some dreams have come true, but many have not. Not that all should, mind you. I hope the rather thin guy who dreamed of being a sumo wrestler came to his senses, and I hope he did not lose his passion in the process. Changing direction in life is not tragic. Losing passion in life is. Something happens to us along the way. Convictions to change the world, downgrade to commitments to pay the bills. Rather than make a difference, we make a salary. Rather than look forward, we look back. Rather than look outward, we look inward. And we do not like what we see. Hank did not. Hank saw a man who had settled for the mediocre, trained in the finest institutions of the world, yet working the night shift in a minimum wage job so that he would not be seen in the light of day. But all that changed when he heard the voice from the mop bucket. Did I mention that this story is true? At first he thought the voice was a joke. Some of the fellows on the third floor play these kinds of tricks. "Henry! Henry!" the voice called. Hank turned. No one called him Henry anymore. "Henry! Henry!" He turned toward the pail. It was glowing, bright red, hot red. He could feel the heat 10 feet away. He stepped closer and looked in. The water was not boiling. "This is strange," Hank mumbled to himself as he took another step to get a closer look. But the voice stopped him. "Don't come any closer. Take off your shoes. You are on holy tile." Suddenly, Hank knew who was speaking. God? I am not making this up. I know that you think I am. It sounds crazy, almost irreverent. God speaking from a hot mop bucket to a janitor named Hank? Would it be believable if I said God was speaking from a burning bush to a shepherd named Moses? Maybe that one's easier to handle, because you have heard it before. But just because it's Moses and a bush rather than Hank and a bucket, it is no less spectacular. It sure shocked the sandals off of Moses. We wonder what amazed that old fellow more, that God spoke in a bush or that God spoke at all. Moses, like Hank, had made a mistake. And this is the last that you will hear of Hank. You remember the story of Moses, adopted nobility, an Israelite reared in an Egyptian palace. His countrymen were slaves, but Moses was privileged. Ate at the royal table, educated in the finest schools. But his most influential teacher had no degree. She was his mother, a Jewish woman who was hired to be his nanny. Moses, you could almost hear her whisper to her young son, God has put you here on purpose. Someday you will set your people free. Never forget, Moses, never forget. Moses did not. The flame of justice grew hotter until it blazed. Moses saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Just like Hank killed the mugger, Moses killed the Egyptian. The next day Moses saw the Hebrew. You would think the slave would have said, thank you. But he did not. Rather than express gratitude, he expressed anger. Will you kill me too? He asked. Moses knew that he was in trouble. He fled Egypt and hid in the wilderness. Call it a career shift, if you will. He went from dining with the heads of state to counting heads of sheep. hardly an upward move. And so it happened that a bright, promising Hebrew began herding sheep in the hills. Moses thought the move was permanent. There is no indication he ever intended to go back to Egypt. In fact, there is every indication he wanted to stay with his sheep. Standing barefoot before the bush, he confessed, "I am not a great man. How can I go to the king and lead the Israelites out of Egypt?" I'm glad Moses asked that question. It's a good one. Why Moses? Or more specifically, why 80-year-old Moses? The 40-year-old version of Moses was more appealing. The Moses we saw in Egypt was brash and confident, but the Moses we find 4 decades later is reluctant and weather-beaten. Had you or I looked at Moses back in Egypt, we would have said, this man is ready for battle. Educated in the finest system in the world, trained by the ablest soldiers, instant access to the inner circle of the Pharaoh. Moses spoke their language and knew their habits. He was the perfect man for the job. Moses at 40, we like. But Moses at 80, no way. Too old, too tired, smells like a shepherd, speaks like a foreigner. What impact would he have on Pharaoh? He's a wrong man for the job. And Moses would have agreed. I tried that once before, he would say. Those people don't want to be helped. Just leave me here to tend my sheep. They are easier to lead. Moses would not have gone. You would not have sent him. I would not have sent him. But God did. How do you figure? Benched at 40 and suited up at 80? Why? What does he know now that he did not know then? What did he learn in the desert that he did not learn in Egypt? The ways of the desert, for one. 40-year-old Moses was a city boy. Octogenarian Moses knows the name of every snake and the location of every watering hole. If he's going to lead thousands of Hebrews into the wilderness, he better know the basics of Desert Life 101. And family dynamics for another. If he's going to be traveling with families for 40 years, it might help to understand just how they work. How'd you like to be on a 40-year road trip with some families? So he marries a woman of faith, the daughter of a Midianite priest, and establishes his own family. But more than the ways of the desert and the people, Moses needed to learn something about himself. Apparently, he had learned it. God says Moses is ready. And to convince him, God speaks to him through a bush. God had to do something dramatic to get Moses' attention. School's out, God tells him. Now it's time to get to work. Poor Moses. He did not even know he was enrolled in school. But he was. And guess what? So are you. The voice from the bush is the voice that whispers to you. It reminds you that God is not finished with you yet. Oh, you may think he is. You may think you've peaked. You may think he's got someone else to do the job. If so, think again. God began doing a good work in you, and I am sure he will continue it until it is finished when Jesus Christ comes again. Did you see what God is doing? A good work in you. Did you see when he will be finished? When Jesus comes again. May I spell out the message? God is not finished with you yet. Your Father wants you to know that. And to convince you, he may surprise you. He may speak through a bush, a mop bucket, or stranger still, he may speak through the Bible, his holy word. Amen. Thank you for visiting Geddes' Weekly Word this week. Let's hope that Geddes is having a relaxing time away from his many duties and mission work. And I'm proud that as a friend of Geddes for over 20 years, I'd like to point out to you that Geddes knows that God is not yet finished with him. And by the way, speaking of 80-year-old Moses, do you know that Geddes is 93 years old and still going strong by the grace of God? Please tune in next week to hear another story of how God can talk to you anywhere and at any time. In the meantime, keep your wits about you and pay attention, especially if you hear a commanding voice calling your name.